Quest 2, Level 2, is called The Danger of a Single Story. If Level 1 was about the power of story, and the fact that narratives have such a control over the human brain, this explores a little bit what happens when those stories are biased, when those stories leave out the points of view and the perspectives of just whole cultures of people. We're going to start with a TED Talk by a woman named Chimamanda Adichie. That was take number 71, but I got it that time. Chimamanda Adichie, her talk is actually called The Danger of a Single Story. And we're also going to read parts of an interview by a guy named Kelly Gallagher. Kelly Gallagher is a high school English teacher, kind of like me. He's a bit of a hero of mine, in fact. But he talks about how story is part of the process of becoming a fully informed person, that by hearing other people's stories, we learn about those people and we become more compassionate and empathetic. And if it feels a little bit like what we did back in Quest number 1 with empathy, that's intentional, right? We're sort of circling around some of the same ideas because those ideas are just important for you to know. We're going to sort of investigate or interrogate that idea that a single story can be dangerous by looking at a series of texts from the culture of Iran. Iran, as you may know, is a Middle Eastern country. It has not always been the most friendly country towards the United States, and it has also not been the most friendly country towards some of its own people. We're going to start with a crash course history video just to give you a sense of the political climate of Iran for the last 100 years or so. And then a couple of texts out of the Springboard book and a few other supplemental texts. Two of them by writers who come from approximately the same generation. Funny and Farsi, which is in your Springboard book. It's a story of what's told from the point of view of a girl who comes to the United States, and she tells the story of her first day of third grade with her mother. And they've come from Iran, and the third grade teacher is trying to get both the mother and the girl involved in the lesson, and things do not necessarily go well. And then there's a poem called My Mother Did Not Become Beautiful by a poet whose name I am currently forgetting, so hang on a second. By a poet named Rez Farmand. And he, kind of in the same way that Fairuza Dumas does in Funny and Farsi, tells us about the restrictions that women in Iran during a certain era were under. Then you dive into a chapter from the graphic novel Persepolis. This is in your Springboard book. We've flashed forward about 30 years. We're into a different period of Iran, and Marjane Satrapi is telling the true story of what was happening with her family during this particular period. And then we're going to flash forward like another 30, 35 years to 2012, where Mojdeh Rezaeipour is going to tell a story. This is actually one of those stories from The Moth, the storytelling series that we saw some of in Quest 1. She is telling a story of being in Iran. She grew up in America, but goes back to Iran in 2012, and some significant events are happening. Along the way, we're going to be learning a little bit about complex sentences. If you don't know what that is, that's fine. If you do know what that is, that's great. But we're going to be using a pretty simple complex sentence structure using the conjunctions before and after. So before this other thing, or this thing happened after this other thing. So, sentences like that are really good for narrative, because where you kind of have to tell a plot of beginning, middle, and end, things happening before. You know what I'm saying. Let's take a look at the rubric. The first three standards here in the rubric, there's a literature one, there are two informational text ones, are mostly about making sure you understand what the TED Talk is telling you by Chimamanda Adichie, understanding what Kelly Gallagher is saying, understanding what's in the poem by Rez Farmand, understanding the stories of Satrapi and Rezaeipour. And in particular, to do well on these standards, you want to think about how these shed some light on the idea of a single story being dangerous. So Are there some voices that are silenced in some of these texts? Are there voices that are amplified in some of these texts? Are people looking at the situations as insiders or as outsiders? So really kind of picking apart the way that these stories are told and how they give a sense of who's important, who's not important, and whether or not that is a dangerous thing. And the piece of writing that you do at the end of the level really is about bringing all of those texts together to answer that question about how a single story can be dangerous in an argument. It's also kind of what we would call a synthesis, and we will spend more time with synthesis in Quest 3, but synthesis really just means bringing different pieces together to make something new. So you're making this new argument about how these texts show the danger of a single story. Let's dig into the argument standard first. So you have to clearly define what the danger of a single story is, or what incomplete stereotypes. Incomplete stereotypes, that's a phrase that Chimamanda Adichie uses in her TED Talk. And you want to do this in a logical multi-paragraph structure, and it should connect somehow with your own life. One of the things that I keep trying to stress in this class is that your experience, your culture, your point of view is important too. So no, you probably weren't born in Iran. You didn't grow up with that culture and the danger of what's happening in Iran. That's not your situation. But somewhere along the way, you've come across a situation that is similar. It might be a little bit similar, it might be way similar, or it might be the complete opposite, and you want to tie in that way. But your experience is important, and I want you to be able to bring that experience to your arguments all the time. For the synthesis standard, you want to bring in evidence from all 4 of the texts. And by that I mean the 4 Iran texts: the poem, the memoir, the oral storytelling, and the graphic novel. And you want to also bring in evidence for advanced from all 3 of the informational texts. So something that you learned in the Crash Course History, something from Chimamanda Adichie's TED Talk, something from Kelly Gallagher. I mean, even if it's as simple as going back to that phrase Adichie used about incomplete stereotypes, you can cite that, you can put that into your writing, and that will get you a third of the way to being advanced on that particular checkbox there. And finally, you want to correctly cite your sources. Over the course of this semester, we're going to be getting more and more detailed with how we do MLA formatting, Modern Language Association formatting, but there is some information in this level document about how to cite your sources correctly. Got it? Good luck.